The sun rose slowly over the quiet streets of Hiranpur, painting the cracked walls of houses with a golden hue. In the modest home at the edge of town, Layla adjusted the thin shawl around her shoulders and glanced at the small mirror. Her reflection showed a simple girl with a soft smile, eyes that had learned to hold both hope and sorrow. Since the morning of her engagement to Adil, whispers had followed her like shadows. The townspeople's voices, sharp and relentless, cut deeper than any insult she had known before. She married him? A neighbor murmured to her friend as they hung laundry across the courtyard. The Adil? The one with wealth, respect, and, everyone knows it, a perfect family? And she's nothing. Layla heard the words but did not turn. She had long learned that facing ridicule only made it worse. Her mother, kind and weary, had pressed a hand to her shoulder the night before and said softly, "They may judge you, but your heart knows the truth, Layla. Let it be enough." The small streets buzzed with a quiet cruelty. At the bakery, a woman laughed behind her hand, whispering to the shopkeeper. At the market, someone shook their head and muttered, "He could do so much better. Why her?" Even the children, innocent yet influenced, stared a little too long, their eyes reflecting the town's judgments. Adil's family had offered little comfort. His mother's disapproval had been sharp, her nose lifted in disdain. "Are you sure about this, Adil?" she had asked during the engagement. "There are families, better families. People of status with respect. Not this." She had gestured vaguely at Layla, as if the girl herself were an inconvenience. Adil's jaw had clenched, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Then he had taken Layla's hand, warm and steady. "Layla is enough," he said firmly. "She is more than enough." But the world outside had not agreed. Photos from the engagement circulated on social media almost immediately. Every post became a battleground. Comments ranged from mockery to cruelty. "He must be joking. She doesn't belong in his world. Someone tell him she's poor." Layla felt the sting of every word, but she refused to crumble. She walked through the market with her head held high, eyes downcast only to avoid confrontation. She knew that humility would be her armor. Every whisper, every laugh, every judgment was like a weight on her shoulders, but she refused to let it define her. Even with all the scrutiny, there was a single truth that kept her heart steady. Adil loved her. She could see it in the way his eyes lingered on hers, in the gentle squeeze of his hand, in the quiet moments when the world faded and it was just the two of them. And yet, she knew his love carried its own burden. Defending her, standing up to family, weathering the town's judgment, it weighed on him, and sometimes she caught the flicker of doubt in his gaze. Walking past the fountain in the town square, Layla overheard another cruel comment. "Look at her walking like she owns the place," a man snickered. "I don't understand how Adil could. Why would he marry someone like that?" Layla's stomach tightened, but she did not falter. Instead, she focused on the warmth of the sunlight on her face and the memory of Adil's promise. She is enough. That thought became her shield. Her life had always been modest. She grew up in a home where love mattered more than money, where lessons in kindness outweighed lessons in pride. Her father, long gone, had taught her that strength comes not from wealth but from character. Her mother had taught her to stand tall, even when the world tried to push her down. And now, married to a man of wealth and status, she faced the test of those lessons. The town's whispers followed her to the doorstep of Adil's house. She paused for a moment, taking a deep breath before stepping into the grand home, its marble floors gleaming beneath her feet. It was a world away from her own, a world where wealth dictated respect and status silenced the voice of love. She felt small, yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. Adil was waiting for her in the hallway, his face breaking into a warm smile the moment he saw her. "Come on," he said, offering his hand. "Let's not let them steal our morning." She took his hand, feeling the familiar surge of reassurance. In that grip, she felt the courage to face another day of whispers, stares, and judgment. She was mocked, yes, but she was not broken. And in that quiet strength, she held the first spark of something far greater than wealth or status. She held the power of her heart, and the love of a man who saw her worth when the world refused to. The first chapter of their married life had begun, and already, it was written in whispers and ridicule. But Layla knew one thing with absolute certainty: she would not let their voices define her. And in that determination she felt the first glimmer of hope that no matter how harsh the world might be, love could endure and dignity could survive, even in the face of mockery. The marble floors of Adil's house gleamed under the morning sunlight, a constant reminder of the world Layla had stepped into, a world far removed from her small, modest home. The furniture was polished to perfection, the curtains heavy with elegance, and the walls adorned with expensive art that seemed to whisper wealth and status. Layla felt out of place. She ran her fingers along the edge of an ornate chair and almost recoiled, afraid she might damage it. But then she felt the warmth of Adil's hand sliding into hers, a quiet anchor. "Don't worry," he said softly, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "It's okay if it feels strange. It's new to both of us." Layla nodded, trying to smile. She wanted to believe that, despite the judgments and whispers outside here, inside their home, they could find a small, private happiness. The days that followed were a delicate dance between love and scrutiny. Every morning they shared simple rituals: tea in the kitchen, laughter over small mistakes, and quiet walks in the garden. It was in these moments that Layla felt truly alive, her heart buoyed by Adil's quiet strength and unwavering attention. One afternoon, while setting the table for lunch, Layla tripped over the edge of a rug, sending a silver spoon clattering to the floor. She froze, cheeks burning. Adil crouched beside her, picking up the spoon and laughing gently. "See? Nothing broke. And I think it added a little drama to lunch," he teased. Layla couldn't help but laugh, the tension in her shoulders easing for a moment. But even as she laughed, she knew the world outside the walls of their home remained unforgiving. Neighbors whispered as she passed, friends who had once smiled at her now kept their distance, and even Adil's relatives observed her with thinly veiled disdain. "She doesn't belong here," someone muttered as she passed the drawing room window. "He'll regret this someday." Layla swallowed the hurt, hiding it behind a polite nod. She had learned that the world's approval was not a requirement for her happiness. But Adil felt it too. He would sometimes pause during family dinners, the weight of defending her pressing down on him, a shadow in his eyes that he tried to hide. One evening, after a particularly tense visit from his cousins, Adil leaned against the doorway of their bedroom, sighing. They don't understand you. They never will." Layla reached for his hand. "Let them talk," she said quietly. "We know the truth, don't we?" Adil nodded, squeezing her hand. "Yes. But it's hard sometimes protecting you from them without making you feel small." She shook her head. "You're not making me feel small. You're giving me strength. That's all I need." Despite their love, the constant scrutiny weighed on them. Every misstep in public felt magnified, every whispered comment a test they hadn't asked to take. Yet, in private, they nurtured each other, finding moments of tenderness that made the world outside fade to a blur. Layla learned the small rhythms of Adil's world. The way he liked his tea, the books he preferred on the bedside table, the quiet music he listened to when he thought no one was watching. And Adil, in turn, began to understand the resilience that had carried her through a life of modest means, a strength that made her laugh, cry, and stand tall in the face of judgment. Even as they found these private joys, the outside world remained a looming presence. Gossip traveled quickly, faces in the marketplace would turn at the sight of her, and social media comments continued to sting like unseen thorns. Yet each smile shared between them, each gentle touch, reminded them that love could survive even in a world eager to judge and tear down. Layla began to feel a quiet confidence take root. She realized that adapting to this new life didn't mean losing herself. It meant walking through the grandeur with dignity, standing tall against ridicule, and cherishing the love that had chosen her, not the opinions that had rejected her. Adil, too, began to see the depth of her courage. He admired the way she carried herself, facing whispers and glances with calm and grace. And in those quiet moments, when the house was theirs alone and the world was silent, he felt a love that was unshakable. One that would be tested, yes, but one that could endure whatever storm might come. Their happiness was fragile, yes, a delicate glass that could shatter under the weight of society's judgment. But in its fragility, there was also beauty, the kind of beauty that could only exist when love and courage intertwined, standing quietly against the world. And so, the early days of their marriage passed, between laughter and whispers, between small triumphs and subtle humiliation. It was a world of contrasts, of tender joy and constant scrutiny. Yet even in this delicate balance, Layla and Adil found a reason to hope, a reason to fight for the life they had chosen together. It was in this fragile happiness that their love would begin to grow, strong enough to endure mockery, resilient enough to face the judgment of a town, and deep enough to survive the crises that were yet to come. The first rain of the season fell on Hiranpur, tapping against the rooftops and turning the dirt streets into slippery mud. Inside Adil's house, Layla sat by the window watching the drops streak down the glass. She had just returned from the market, where neighbors' whispers followed her like shadows. Even the rain couldn't wash away their judgment. That morning, a misunderstanding had already set the town ablaze. A valuable painting had gone missing from Adil's study. It wasn't Layla's fault. The housekeeper had misplaced it, but the sight of her carrying a box of books past the study earlier had been enough to spark rumors. Within hours, voices whispered, fingers pointed, and the town was certain. Layla had done something wrong. She probably sold it, someone muttered. How else would she have access to such things? She's no good, said another. Mark my words, he'll regret marrying her. Layla felt the familiar sting of injustice, a tightness in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded a shawl. She had been trying so hard to adapt, to live with dignity, to prove that love and character mattered more than wealth. And now, all her efforts seemed meaningless in the eyes of the town. Adil came home that afternoon, rain dripping from his coat, the worry already etched deep into his face. He had heard the rumors. He had seen the comments circulating on social media, mocking, cruel, accusatory. Layla, he began, his voice tight. Did you have anything to do with the painting? Her eyes widened in shock, not at the question itself, but at the shadow of doubt it carried. No, Adil. Of course not. I haven't even touched it. Her voice trembled, the first crack in her usually calm demeanor. Adil ran a hand through his damp hair, torn between defending her and the pressure of appearances. I know you didn't, he said, though his jaw was tight. But people, the town, they're relentless. They won't believe you without proof. The weight of the accusation pressed down on her like a storm. Layla's cheeks burned, not with shame but with frustration and hurt. She had married Adil not for wealth but for love. And now, that love was being tested in ways neither of them had expected. Days passed. The whispers became louder. Friends they had known for years turned their backs. Adil's relatives voiced thinly veiled suspicions at family gatherings. Even casual conversations in the marketplace carried the weight of accusation. Layla found herself retreating into silence, her usual warmth dimmed by humiliation. She spent hours in their small garden, staring at the rain-soaked flowers, thinking about the twists of fate that had brought her to this point. She questioned her worth, her place in Adil's world, and even her ability to endure the cruelty that seemed to follow her. Adil noticed the change immediately. The light in her eyes, the spark that had drawn him to her, was dimmed by worry and heartache. And he hated it. Every glance from the outside world, every whisper, every pointed finger was a dagger aimed at her, and he felt powerless to stop it. One evening, he found her sitting alone by the fountain at the edge of their property, the water reflecting her somber expression. He knelt beside her, his voice low and tense. Layla, look at me, he said. She raised her eyes, damp with unshed tears. I'm not going to let them hurt you. I don't care what they say. I don't care what they think. Her hands trembled as she reached for his. Adil, I feel like I don't belong anywhere. Not in this house, not in this town, not even in your world. He held her close, the rain soaking his coat, the wind whipping around them as if the elements themselves shared the tension in their hearts. You belong with me, he whispered fiercely. And nothing, no rumor, no mockery, no town full of people, can change that. I promise you. But even as he spoke, Layla could feel the shadow of doubt creeping in. She had survived hardship all her life, poverty, loss, humiliation, but this was different. This wasn't just personal, it was public. And the public's judgment was relentless, unforgiving, and cruel. Amidst the tension, a small seed of hope glimmered. Layla remembered the lessons from her childhood. Strength is not measured by wealth or status, but by resilience and integrity. Her father's words came to her, stand tall even if the world pushes you down. And her mother's gentle voice reminded her that love could shield her when the world could not. Still the fear lingered. The accusations had shaken the foundations of her new life. Would Adil's love be enough to withstand the storm? Could she survive the judgment of a town that had already condemned her? Unseen by all, the crisis had another layer, one that would later change everything. Layla's past, quietly hidden, held the key to the truth. Proof that her character, her intelligence, and her courage were far greater than anyone in Hiranpur realized. But for now, that secret remained a fragile ember, waiting for the right moment to ignite and turn the tide in her favor. The tension between society's cruelty and personal integrity reached its peak. Every knock at the door, every whispered comment, every social media post became a test of their bond. Layla and Adil found themselves facing a choice: retreat into silence, letting the world dictate their lives, or stand together, defiant, and let love and truth define them instead. And in that storm, as the rain fell heavier and the night deepened, both of them understood that this was only the beginning. The first real challenge had arrived. and it would either break them or forge a strength neither had yet imagined. The storm had passed, leaving the streets of Hiranpur slick and empty, but the echoes of judgment lingered in Layla's mind like a shadow she could not shake. Inside the quiet of Adil's house, she moved from room to room with a kind of mechanical grace, performing chores with hands that felt heavier than usual, her heart weighed down by whispers that refused to die. She avoided the grand hall, where the missing painting had once hung, now returned but still a symbol of suspicion. Every corner seemed to hold a reminder of the town's mockery, every glance from the window a potential accusation. Layla felt small, trapped between the love she cherished and the world that refused to see her worth. Adil noticed the change immediately. He would glance toward her across the breakfast table, searching for the warmth he had once seen in her eyes, only to find a shadow instead. "Layla," he said softly one morning, pausing mid-bite, "you don't have to do this alone." She shook her head, forcing a small smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she whispered, though the lie clung to her like a second skin. "I always am." But in her heart she was anything but fine. That evening she wandered into the garden alone, the moonlight washing the flowers in silver. She pressed her hands to her face, tears slipping quietly, not from fear but from the exhaustion of being misunderstood. Every rumor, every malicious glance, every sharp whisper felt like a blade cutting her down. Her mind drifted back to childhood memories, bittersweet but grounding. She remembered the small house she grew up in, modest but full of love, where her father's laughter echoed in the kitchen and her mother's gentle words soothed even the harshest day. Her father had taught her, "You will not always be rich in gold, but you can always be rich in heart. Hold that close and nothing can break you." Her mother had echoed that lesson, often more quietly. "They can whisper and judge, but their words only have power if you let them. Stand tall, Layla, and let your heart lead you." Layla drew strength from those memories. She remembered long nights spent sewing clothes for her siblings, days when she skipped meals so that the little ones could eat. She recalled helping neighbors without thought for reward, comforting friends in pain, and refusing to compromise her integrity even when the world was cruel. And now, in this house that seemed to shine with wealth yet felt cold with judgment, she realized that those lessons were more important than ever. She could not let the world dictate her worth. She could not allow mockery to chip away at the foundation of who she was. Adil came to the garden quietly, standing beside her without touching, respecting the space she needed. "You're always thinking," he said gently. "Always carrying the weight of everything on your shoulders. You shouldn't have to do that alone." Layla turned to him, her voice raw. "It's not just me, Adil. It's the town, your family, the world. Feels like everyone wants to see me fail. Every mistake, every slip, it's all magnified. I don't know if I can keep up." He took her hands, holding them firmly. "Yes, you can. And you will. Because you are stronger than they will ever understand. And I am here. Every step, every challenge, we face them together." But even as she felt the warmth of his presence, Layla could not shake the creeping doubt. What if love alone wasn't enough? What if society's cruelty had the power to break them, to undo everything they had built? That night, she sat by the window long after Adil had gone to bed, staring at the stars reflected in the puddles on the streets below. Her mind wandered, questioning, reflecting, but also planning. Somewhere deep inside, a spark flickered, a quiet determination not just to survive, but to rise, to prove that the worth of a person could never be measured by wealth or gossip. It was during these long, sleepless nights that she thought of the secret she had carried with her, a truth no one knew, a truth that would one day change everything. It was a small, delicate ember now, hidden behind humility and kindness, but it was there. And she knew, without knowing exactly when, that the time would come to let it shine. Days turned into weeks, and the tension in the house grew. Adil began to understand the depth of her isolation. He watched her quietly, noticing the way she would retreat into herself after interactions with relatives, the careful way she navigated the household, always respectful but wary. And he began to realize that protecting her required more than words. It required patience, understanding, and unwavering trust. Layla, meanwhile, immersed herself in quiet acts of courage. She helped the housekeeper organize the kitchen with efficiency that impressed even Adil. She learned the household accounts quickly, and she discovered ways to manage the staff with grace and fairness. No one saw these acts, yet they gave her a sense of control, a proof that her intellect and capability mattered even if the town refused to acknowledge them. And so the days of isolation passed. The whispers, the judging eyes, the distant cousins, they all became part of the backdrop, a world she navigated with quiet dignity. Layla realized something profound. The world could humiliate her, it could doubt her, it could even try to tear her down, but it could not touch her inner strength, the love she shared with Adil, or the secret that might one day prove her worth beyond all doubt. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Adil found her sitting at the study desk, writing in a small notebook she carried everywhere. He leaned against the doorway, curiosity mixed with concern. "What are you writing?" he asked gently. Layla looked up, her eyes calm but resolute. "Thoughts. Plans. Things I need to remember, things I need to do." She paused, a faint smile on her lips. "One day it will all make sense. One day the truth will be seen." Adil stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I believe in you. Always." In that moment, amid the quiet of the house, Layla realized that even isolation could be a teacher. It had forced her to reflect, to grow, and to prepare. The mockery of the town, the cruel whispers, and the doubts had not broken her, they had strengthened her resolve. The tension between society's mockery and personal integrity reached a delicate balance. Layla understood that the coming days would test her again. But now she had patience, resilience, and a secret strength quietly waiting for the right moment to shine. And deep in her heart, she knew that when that moment came, the world would see her in a way it had never imagined, and the fragile ember of hope she carried would ignite into a blaze impossible to ignore. The town square of Hiranpur was unusually crowded that morning. People gathered, murmuring in confusion, curiosity, and anticipation. Whispers flitted like restless shadows. "What's happening? Why is Adil calling everyone here? Is it about her?" Inside Adil's house, Layla paced nervously. The secret she had carried for so long, the truth she had protected with humility, patience, and quiet strength, was finally ready to surface. Her heart raced, but unlike the trembling fear she had known before, this was a surge of courage. The time had come. Adil entered, his expression calm but resolute. He had seen her grow through weeks of whispers, judgment, and isolation, and he knew that this moment was as much for her as it was for the town. He took her hand, giving a reassuring squeeze. "It's your story to tell," he said, "and I'll be right here every step." Layla nodded. The world outside might never have believed her worth before, but today that disbelief would crumble. When they stepped into the town square, a hush fell. Faces turned, eyes narrowed in anticipation. The crowd had no idea that the modest, soft-spoken woman they had mocked for months would soon upend everything they thought they knew. Layla stood tall, shoulders squared, hands clasped. She began, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Many of you have judged me," she said quietly, yet with authority. "You have whispered, you have mocked, you have assumed that because I come from a humble family, I am unworthy of love, respect, or honor. You have been wrong." A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd. Adil stepped beside her, his gaze unwavering, silently lending her strength. Layla's voice grew stronger. She revealed the secret she had carried, the truth of her past accomplishments, sacrifices, and character. Perhaps she had quietly inherited a lost family fortune, but more importantly, she had spent years building a foundation of intelligence, courage, and moral integrity that no wealth could measure. She recounted the anonymous acts of generosity she had performed in the town, the way she had solved problems for people in need, and the quiet contributions she had made to the community, all without seeking recognition. The crowd fell silent. Eyes widened, jaws slackened, and murmurs transformed into astonishment. The people who had sneered at her, mocked her, and spread rumors felt a sudden, jarring awareness of their misjudgment. Adil stepped forward, his voice carrying over the stunned silence. "I have loved Layla from the moment I met her," he said. "Not for wealth, not for status, but because of the woman she is, kind, intelligent, brave, and strong. And today, I ask you all to see her as I do." Some people lowered their heads in shame, realizing how harsh and unfair they had been. Others struggled to hide their astonishment, whispering to each other, "I didn't know, she's extraordinary." Layla's humility shone through. She did not gloat, nor did she seek revenge for the months of mockery. Instead, she offered forgiveness in the quietest, most powerful way, through grace. "I do not hold your judgment against you," she said softly. "But I hope that from today, you will learn to see people not as they appear, but for who they truly are." The emotional weight of her words settled over the town. A few brave individuals approached her cautiously, their eyes apologetic. Some admitted their fault openly, others remained silent, unsure how to respond. But the point was clear. Hiranpur could no longer dismiss her, could no longer mock her, could no longer ignore the truth. Adil pulled her close, whispering, "You were always enough, Layla. And now the world knows it too." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness but from a deep, overwhelming sense of vindication. Every insult, every doubt, every harsh whisper had led her to this moment. She had endured, she had grown, and she had triumphed without losing her integrity. The town's reaction was mixed, yet the change was undeniable. Some who had mocked her sought reconciliation, humbled by the truth. Others, unable to face their shame, slunk away, their gossip and judgment silenced by the undeniable reality of Layla's worth. Adil and Layla walked through the square together, hand in hand, the crowd parting respectfully as people absorbed the transformation of the story they had all misjudged. Their love, once whispered about with skepticism, now radiated as a beacon of courage and devotion. In the days that followed, Hiranpur began to see a subtle shift. Layla's quiet heroism inspired others, her actions setting an example of humility, intelligence, and moral strength. She did not flaunt her accomplishments, but the town could not ignore the impact of her character. Adil's family, too, found themselves humbled. Those who had expressed disapproval now saw the depth of her worth. Some apologized sincerely, others, perhaps too proud, remained distant. But Layla had learned the ultimate lesson: approval from all was unnecessary. Integrity, resilience, and love were what truly mattered. And in the quiet moments, alone with Adil, she allowed herself to breathe freely. She had endured ridicule, scandal, and judgment. She had faced doubt and humiliation. And yet, she had emerged stronger, her heart intact, her dignity unshaken, and her love triumphant. The revelation had changed everything. Not just for her but for the people who had doubted, mocked, and underestimated her. Hiranpur would remember this day, the day the poor girl they had mocked revealed the truth, not with arrogance but with courage, humility, and grace. And as the sun set over the town, painting the streets in gold, Layla realized something profound. Vindication was not just about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself that love, integrity, and quiet strength could endure anything, and that no mockery, rumor, or prejudice could ever take that away. The air in Hiranpur felt different now. The whispers that once followed Layla like shadows had softened into quiet admiration. The streets, once filled with judgmental glances and sly comments, now offered nods of respect, sometimes even smiles. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but to Layla and Adil, it marked a profound shift. Inside their home, the atmosphere was lighter, warmer. Layla moved through the rooms with a sense of ease she had never known before. The house, once a place of scrutiny and tension, now felt like a sanctuary. She laughed freely, shared moments with Adil without fear of interruption, and began to feel truly at peace. Adil watched her from the doorway one morning, a soft smile on his lips. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "Not just the house, the town, the people, everything." Layla shook her head, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I didn't change anyone," she said softly. "I just stayed true to myself. The rest had to catch up." Their love, tempered by trials and strengthened through adversity, now radiated in ways the town could not ignore. They shared small joys, a quiet breakfast on the veranda, walks in the garden, soft laughter in the evenings. Each day, the fragile happiness of their early marriage had grown into a steady, resilient bond. Some relationships had mended. Friends who had distanced themselves approached cautiously, offering apologies for past judgments. Adil's family had begun to recognize Layla's worth, some with humility, others with lingering pride, but all with a new understanding of the woman they had once dismissed. Layla, however, never sought revenge or validation. Her joy came not from the correction of the town's judgment, but from the quiet knowledge of her integrity and the love she shared with Adil. She even helped others who faced prejudice in subtle ways, encouraging young women in the town, supporting families in need, and teaching that strength of character matters more than wealth or status. One afternoon, as the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Adil and Layla sat in the garden, their hands intertwined. "You've taught me more than I ever imagined," Adil said, his voice filled with awe. "About patience, strength, courage, about love that doesn't need the world's approval." Layla leaned her head against his shoulder. "And you've taught me that love can protect even when the world is cruel. That loyalty and trust can endure anything." The streets of Hiranpur, once so judgmental, now felt quieter, gentler. People still talked, but there was a sense of respect that had not existed before. And in the hearts of the town's residents, a lesson lingered. True worth is measured by actions, character, and compassion, not wealth, status, or gossip. Layla and Adil's life together continued, each day a testament to the power of perseverance, love, and moral integrity. They hosted small gatherings, helped neighbors, and nurtured their community quietly but effectively. Those who had doubted them learned to accept, and some even to admire, the resilience and strength of a woman who had once been mocked and underestimated. One evening, as they walked through the familiar streets of their town, hand in hand, Layla paused to smile at a group of children playing in the square. One little girl, curious and unafraid, looked up at her and asked, "Auntie, were people really mean to you?" Layla knelt down, her eyes kind, her voice gentle. "Yes, sometimes people can be unfair," she said softly. "But the most important thing is to stay kind, strong, and true to yourself. That's how you win even when the world doesn't understand." The girl nodded, a spark of understanding in her eyes, and ran off to join her friends. Layla stood, brushing off her dress, and looked up at Adil, who smiled back, a mixture of pride and deep love in his gaze. They walked together, knowing that life would have challenges, but now they faced them with unshakable confidence in each other. Their journey had been long, filled with ridicule, heartbreak, and doubt, but it had also revealed the power of love, the strength of character, and the quiet triumph of integrity over prejudice. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the town, Layla felt a sense of peace that had been hard-won but absolute. The mockery, the judgment, the whispers, they were no longer a part of her story. Instead, what remained was love, respect, and the knowledge that she had endured, survived, and thrived, not by the world's approval but by the strength of her heart. Adil squeezed her hand gently, and together they stepped forward, ready to face the future, not as the poor girl and the wealthy man the town once pitted, but as equals, partners, and champions of their own story. The world had finally recognized what they already knew. Love and virtue triumph over shallow judgment, and true strength comes not from wealth or status, but from courage, integrity, and the heart's unyielding resilience. And in that realization, Layla felt the most profound peace of all. A life lived with dignity, a love that endured, and a story that would inspire others long after whispers turned to admiration. The weeks after the revelation felt almost surreal. Hiranpur, a town that once thrived on gossip and judgment, now seemed to move a little slower, as if it were catching its breath after the storm of the truth. People who had mocked Layla avoided her only briefly, and then some began approaching her, not with ridicule but with curiosity, awe, and a tentative respect. Layla noticed it everywhere. At the market, a shopkeeper bowed his head politely and offered her the best produce without comment. In the town square, neighbors nodded warmly as she passed. Even the children who had once stared at her with mockery now giggled as they waved shyly, no longer afraid of her, or of the judgmental glances of the adults. Adil watched these changes silently, pride swelling in his chest. "It's like the town finally learned to see clearly," he whispered one evening as they walked through the fading sunlight. Layla smiled softly, resting her head on his shoulder. "They've learned, but I've learned more. That no matter what others think, I can stay true to myself, and that's enough." Their life together grew richer in subtle ways. Simple breakfasts on the veranda, hands brushing over steaming cups of tea, laughter over small mistakes. They savored these moments more deeply than ever before, knowing how fragile happiness had once seemed. Yet the town's transformation was not complete overnight. A few skeptics lingered, whispering behind curtains or muttering to friends. Some tried to minimize Layla's achievements, claiming it was luck, coincidence, or Adil's influence that had made her remarkable. Layla met this with quiet dignity. She did not argue, did not raise her voice. Instead, she continued her acts of kindness, her quiet leadership in the community, and her willingness to help those in need. She helped the town organize food drives, taught literacy lessons to women who had never had the chance to study, and even coordinated aid for families affected by floods that hit nearby villages. Each act of generosity slowly silenced critics more effectively than words ever could. One day, a group of young girls approached her, their faces bright with hope. "Auntie, will you teach us how to manage the small market stalls?" one asked eagerly. "We want to help our families like you help yours." Layla knelt to their level, a gentle smile lighting her face. "Of course. You can learn anything, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Strength comes from knowledge, courage, and kindness, never from what people say about you." Meanwhile, Adil's family underwent a quieter, but no less profound, transformation. Those who had been harsh and judgmental now recognized the depth of Layla's intelligence and character. Some approached her with apologies, and others silently offered support. Adil's mother, once the most skeptical, stood beside her daughter-in-law during a community event, a subtle nod of acceptance replacing the sharp critique of the past. Through it all, Layla never let pride overtake her. She celebrated not because she had won over others, but because she had survived, thrived, and remained true to herself. She taught the town through example, humility paired with strength, kindness paired with courage, and love paired with unwavering integrity. Life at home became a tapestry of small joys and profound love. One quiet evening, Adil found Layla tending to their small garden, her fingers brushing the petals of blooming flowers. "You've changed this house too," he said softly, watching how gracefully she moved. "It used to feel like a palace where people lived, not where hearts could grow. Now, it feels like home." Layla glanced up, a twinkle in her eyes. "A home is where hearts belong," she said, brushing dirt from her hands. "Walls and marble don't make a home. Love does. And patience. And forgiveness." Their love deepened with each day, strengthened not just by joy but by trials overcome. They traveled together to nearby villages to help communities in need, they shared quiet evenings reading together by the fire, and they laughed, cried, and planned for a future that once seemed impossible. The town, once obsessed with status and appearances, slowly began to shift its values. People started to measure character instead of wealth, integrity instead of social standing. Hiranpur remembered Layla, not as the poor girl who married a wealthy man, but as a woman whose courage, humility, and intelligence had changed the community forever. One evening, as they sat on their veranda watching the sunset paint the horizon in shades of gold and crimson, Layla leaned her head against Adil's shoulder. "Do you remember when everyone doubted me?" she asked quietly. "I do," he said, holding her close. "And do you know what I've learned?" "What?" she whispered, smiling. "That the world may doubt you, mock you, or try to break you, but it can never touch the truth of who you are. And no one, can diminish love when it's real." Layla closed her eyes, feeling the truth of his words settle into her bones. The past, the judgment, the whispers, they were all behind them now. Ahead lay life, full of promise, full of love, and full of meaning that no society's shallow opinions could ever erase. And so, their story ended not with wealth or revenge, but with peace, fulfillment, and hope. Hiranpur had learned to see beyond appearances, Layla had learned to embrace her strength fully, and together she and Adil stepped into a life defined not by the opinions of others, but by courage, love, and the unwavering power of a good heart. Even years later, people would speak of the poor girl who married Adil differently, no longer with mockery but with respect, admiration, and a quiet reverence for the woman who had endured, forgiven, and transformed not only her own life but the hearts of everyone around her.